Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Manachari Yamunatira Manachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gokula Nanda, Radha Gokula Nanda, Radha Gokula Nanda, Shri Radhe Jaya. Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda ki, Shri Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ji ki, Shri Shri Gauranitai ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Okay, Hare Krishna everyone, thank you for coming. So this evening we have our Bhagavad Gita class. Has anyone not been to an evening Bhagavad Gita class at the temple before? Everyone's been at least once before? Okay, good. So today we are reading from chapter 10, verse number 7. So we'll be discussing that. So we'll just chant a invocation mantra. You can repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so we'll read the verse in Sanskrit. We'll recite it, and you're welcome to try as well. And then we'll read the translation and the purport by Srila Prabhupada, and then we'll get into a discussion. So we'll read the Sanskrit first. Etam vibhutim yogam cha. If you Mama yo veti tatvataha. So vikalpena yogena. Yujyate natra samshayaha. Etam vibhutim yogam cha mama yo veti tatvataha so vikalpena yogena yujyate natra samshayaha etam vibhutim yogam cha mama yo veti tatvataha so vikalpena yogena yujyate natra samshayaha. Does anyone have a copy and would like to try? I've only got this one if you want to have a try.
That would be nice. So,
You
you
can
want me to read?
Yeah, you can recite the Sanskrit and everyone can follow.
Shall I just speak here? Yeah? Shall I?
Yeah.
Etam vibhutim yogam cha etam vibhutim yogam cha mama yo veti tattvatvat yogo mama yo veti tattvata soha vikalpena yogena yujyate nama sanchaya yujyate natra sanchaya. So do you want me to read this?
Oh, we'll read it.
Okay.
later. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Thank you for trying. Thank you. Anyone else would like to read the site? Okay, we'll read the word for word translation. Etam, all this. Vibhutim, opulence. Yogam, mystic power. Cha, also. Mama, of mine. Yaha, anyone who. Veti, knows. Tatvataha, factually. Saha, he. Avikalpena, without division. Yogena, in devotional service. Yujyate, is engaged. Na, never. Atra, here. Samshayaha, doubt. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. One who is factually convinced of this opulence and mystic power of mine engages in unalloyed devotional service. Of this there is no doubt. Purport. The highest summit of spiritual perfection is knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unless one is firmly convinced of the different opulences of the Supreme Lord, he cannot engage in devotional service. Generally, people know that God is great, but they do not know in detail how God is great. Here are the details. If one knows factually how God is great, then naturally he becomes a surrendered soul and engages himself in the devotional service of the Lord. When one factually knows the opulences of the Supreme, there is no alternative but to surrender to him. This factual knowledge can be known from the descriptions in Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita and similar literatures. In the administration of this universe, there are many demigods distributed throughout the planetary system, and the chief of them are Brahma, Lord Shiva, and the 4 great Kumaras, and the other patriarchs. There are many forefathers of the population of the universe, and all of them are born of the Supreme Lord Krishna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original forefather of all forefathers. These are some of the opulences of the Supreme Lord. When one is firmly convinced of them, he accepts Krishna with great faith and without any doubt, and he engages in devotional service. All this particular knowledge is required in order to increase one's interest in the loving devotional service of the Lord. One should not neglect to understand fully how great Krishna is, for by knowing the greatness of Krishna, one will be able to be fixed in sincere devotional service. So we'll now just chant a short prayer, offering our gratitude to our teachers and to the Supreme Lord. You can follow along if you know it. Om Gyantimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so how many of you read the Bhagavad Gita? Like front to cover to cover? Few people? Okay. How many of you read some parts of the Bhagavad Gita? A few more? How many of you have never heard of the Bhagavad Gita? Hopefully nobody. Okay, so we know there's 18 chapters in the Gita, and we're on chapter 10 today. So actually it's said that those 18 chapters you can divide into 3 parts. The first 6 chapters talk about karma yoga. The middle 6 chapters talk about bhakti yoga. And the last 6 chapters talk about jnana yoga. Now, you know when you have, this was a really interesting analogy to describe this. So when you have a procession and there's like a VIP coming, right? Where would the VIP be in that procession? In the front? Anyone else? So usually they'll probably be in the middle because they'll probably have like security behind them and in front of them, right? So usually they're in the middle. Or if you have like in your house like some valuables and goods, you're not going to keep it right in the front of the house, or maybe not even at the back of the house, but probably hidden somewhere in the middle of the house, right? So, you know, the most important things are usually in the middle. And so these middle 6 chapters of the Gita are really, really precious, valuable, important. And that's what we are in the middle. So this particular verse is within the Bhakti Yoga 6 chapters. So in the previous chapter, in the end of the 9th chapter, Krishna says to Arjun, engage your mind always in thinking of me. Become my devotee, offer obeisances to me, and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. So this is Krishna telling Arjun what to do. Now, when we're told that we should do something, then naturally the next question we have is, okay, you told me to do this, but how do I do it, right? And so Krishna is anticipating that Arjun is going to ask him, okay, so how do I do it? You're telling me to always think of you, be your devotee, worship you. Like, how do I do it? How do I be completely absorbed? And so that's what this chapter is about. It's Krishna telling Arjun how he can do that. Also, from tomorrow and the next few days, the next 4 verses are actually the nutshell verses of the Gita, called the Chatushloki. So it summarizes everything in essence in the Gita in those next 4 verses. So do tune into those classes because it will give you a nice summary of the Gita. But anyways, back to today's verse. So from the purport that we read, I picked out sort of 3 themes that we could discuss today. So one is the opulence of Krishna, so understanding how great he is. And the second thing we can discuss is, well, if we know that, but then what keeps us from understanding the greatness of Krishna and accepting, the fact that he is God? And then thirdly, surrender. If we can't accept it, then that means we can't surrender. So, how do we understand this? So let me ask you all a question. You must follow like some great people, right? So who do you follow? Who do you feel attracted to? Like celebrities, sports stars, anyone? Yes? Krishna. Okay, perfect. Anyone else? Anyone you follow, like on social media? Sadhguru. Okay, yeah. Spiritual personality, nice. Anyone else?
I follow quite a few. Gaurav Das and Gopal Das. I like to listen to them, but different times. Because they all have a way of explaining Gita differently. Even though it's the same thing, but the way they explain, everybody's got a
You guys are very spiritual people. I was expecting you to name like celebrities and stuff, but amazing. But generally, people follow like, rich people, famous people, sports stars, etc. Why and why is it that we read the news and or newspapers or go on social media and follow these people? Because we actually want to hear about things that are happening or about people, and we're attracted to them. Now, the definition of opulence is something which attracts, yeah? And so, can anyone maybe list out what an opulence might be? What attracts? What attracts you? Fame, okay. Money. Luxury items, yeah. Anything else? Charming. How charming people are. Their personality, that attracts, okay? Res- their behavior, their conduct, that attracts, okay? Knowledge, okay, yes. So actually, it's said in the scriptures that there are 6 kinds of opulences, and we actually got a lot of them already, but I'll list them out anyway. So there's wealth, we mentioned, there's strength, there's fame, knowledge, beauty, and renunciation, okay? These are the 6. Renunciation. So like, for example, you mentioned Sadhguru, So a lot of these gurus, you mentioned Gauranga Prabhu, Gaura Gopal Prabhu, a lot of these are renunciates, and that's something which attracts us to them, The fact that they've dedicated their life in service to others, So, yeah, just going through, like we might get attracted to TV and film stars because of their beauty and their fame, or to rich people because of their wealth, to sports stars because they've got the strength and in their various fields, scientists or, educational people because of their knowledge, or like monks and renunciates and nuns because of their renunciation. Now, but do we know anybody who has all 6 of these opulences in full? Right? We know people who might be rich, but then are they necessarily also fully renounced? We know someone who may be beautiful, but are they necessarily the most strongest? No, right? We probably don't know of anyone like that. And so anyone who actually possesses all 6 of these opulences in full is God. Okay? That's the definition of God. Anyone know what the word in like Hindi and Sanskrit is for God? Shishi Radha Gokulananda ki jai, Shishi Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai, Shishi Garntai ki jai. Yeah, so in Hindi, what would you say God? What's the word for God? Bhagavan, right? Do you know what the word Bhagavan means? If you split it up?
Yeah, it's something
Okay.
That's all different word to it, but 100% remember. That's something related to that.
Sure. Anyone else? So Bhaga actually means opulence, and Van means one who possesses. right? So Bhagavan, one who possesses opulence. And when Krishna was present on this earth, when he came down in Dvapara Yuga, he showed all of his opulences in full at various times. And we'll just discuss a couple of those examples. So for example, if we talk about wealth, right? How many wives did he have? Do you know?
8.
No.
16,000.
16,000?
16,108.
Yes, 16,108 wives. And did you know that he built a palace for each of his wives? And they were bedecked with so many jewels that there was no need for any electricity or light or anything, because the jewels were shining so much, so much opulence and wealth. And, we can think, how can someone marry 16,108 wives and then even maintain them with so much opulence, so much wealth? But remember, he's God. He's all powerful. No, have you ever heard of any other person in history who's been able to do this apart from Krishna? No. When we talk about strength, who knows about the Govardhan Leela? We celebrate it usually the day after Diwali, right? So this is when Krishna lifted Govardhan Hill. I think he was like 5 years old, and he lifted this big mountain, big hill, with his left hand, pinky finger, right? Like, could we even do that with something very, very small? No. And Krishna did that at such a young age, displaying his strength. And his beauty, like when he was on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, when the war was going on between the Kauravas and Pandavas, he was actually around like 90 years old or something like that. But it's actually said he looked like he was in his mid-20s. He was so, so young. And at that time, he was actually a great-grandfather. He had kids who had kids who had kids. And knowledge, he spoke the Bhagavad Gita, which is a scriptural text that is relevant to us even today, that we study today like we are. It's the essence of scripture. It's a manual for life, and he actually spoke it. So, he's all knowledgeable. In verse 19 of this chapter, Krishna says to Arjun, "Yes, I will tell you of my splendorous manifestations, but only of those which are prominent, O Arjun, for my opulence is limitless." And so in the rest of the chapter, then he goes on to give lots of examples of his opulence, just to pacify Arjun's inquisitiveness. So for example, he'll say, of all lights, I am the sun. What's greater than the sun in terms of the light source? Nothing, right? And so it's, Krishna's sharing how he is the greatest of all things. And then in the last 3 verses in the chapter, I'll read the verses and then we can summarize it. So he says, "O mighty conqueror of enemies, there is no end to my divine manifestations. What I have spoken to you is but a mere indication of my infinite opulences. Know that all opulent, beautiful, and glorious creations spring from but a spark of my splendor. But what need is there, Arjun, for all this detailed knowledge? With a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe." So he's saying that everything he's shared in this chapter about his opulences, he says it's just a spark of my splendor. It's just something very, very small that I've shared with you. There's so much more, And we hear about different incarnations of Krishna, right? So do you know about Lord Nrsingadev? You've heard of Lord Nrsingadev? So he was actually a half-man, half-lion incarnation of Krishna, right? And he came to protect his devotee Prahlad, who was a young boy, who was being attacked by his father, who was a demon, Hiranyakashipu, right? Has anyone ever seen a half-man, half-lion incarnation before? No. And on top of that, he appeared from a pillar. Has anyone ever seen somebody appear from a pillar? No, right? Only Krishna can do that. He took the form of a tortoise, Kurmadev. And, in the churning of the milk ocean, the form of the tortoise was his back was used, and the mountain was being churned, on the back of the tortoise and used as a pivot. Has anyone else ever done that before? And Lord Ram, so Krishna came in the form of Lord Ram, human form, right? But he killed Ravana, right? He defeated him. And Ravana was someone who even the demigods feared. Demigods are superior to humans, right? So technically you could say superior to Ram because Ram came in the human form. But Ravan used to rule over even the demigods, but Ram defeated him. So, so much greatness, so much opulence of Krishna that we know. And so it's like, okay, no brainer, like Krishna is God, right? He's great. But then why is it that we still struggle to connect with him? Why is it that maybe perhaps we haven't fully accepted Krishna? So let's do an experiment as we try to explore this a little more. I want you to show me your right hand. Wave. Okay. I want you to point to a window. Okay. I want you to point to the ceiling. Point to a door. Point to your neighbor. Point to your feet. Point to your eyes. And point to yourself. Okay. All of you pointed to like the heart region. Interesting. So we'll come back to it. So in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 2, actually very early on in this conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, Krishna actually reveals who we are. What is our real identity? And we are basically spirit souls. We're part and parcel of Krishna. So in chapter 2, verse 17, he says, "That which pervades the entire body you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul." But how many of us actually identify ourselves as a soul? We are a soul, but do we day to day, moment to moment, identify ourselves as a soul? Do we act like we are the soul? We don't, yeah. So, why is it that we're not situated in our real identity as spirit souls? Why are we not acting like that if that is our real identity? And actually, the scriptures explain that we have this gross body, right? We can touch, but we also have a subtle body, right? And that is comprised of the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. And they all have a different function. So the function of the mind is to accept and reject, right? It will say, I like this, or I don't like this. The function of the intelligence is discrimination. Okay, and it will try to present logic, analyze, and discriminate between good and bad. And then the third is the false ego. Now, ego means sense of identity, right? So false ego means a false sense of identity. And there's this really interesting analogy that I heard. So we can consider the ego to be the boss of the inside world, right? And the mind and the intelligence are like its two bodyguards. And so based on the situation that the ego has created, what frame of, I want to say frame of mind, but that's probably not the right word, but what situation the ego considers itself to be in, the mind accepts and rejects based on that. And then the intelligence will supply the logic, the analysis, etc., to support that. Okay? So for example, how many of you have had a friend who's really glorified you and praised you and spoken really good things about you? Anyone? Yeah? Has that same person then ever criticized you or said something bad about you? Yeah? So when the former has happened, right, when your friend has praised you, you probably think like, oh yes, this person thinks so good of me. And the ego will think, yes, I'm so good, I'm absolutely great. The ego gets puffed up, is satisfied, and then the mind accepts it, right? Because the ego has said, yes, like I am the greatest. So the mind also believes that. And then the intelligence kicks in and thinks of reasons why what your friend said is right to satisfy the ego, right? And if your friend then criticized you, it's the same person, right? Nothing's changed. But something does change within you, doesn't it? Because the ego now is not happy that you've been criticized. So the mind will reject that person, thinking they don't know what they're talking about, And then the intelligence will supply the logic and analysis and give the opposite argument to what happened before. And think, oh, this person's too proud, this person's too arrogant, right? Same person, slightly different situation. And because of the way the ego perceives the situation, we act accordingly. So then why do we have this false ego? So this false ego, this false sense of identity where we're not able to be situated into as our true identity as a soul, which Krishna says, we are parts and parcels of him, as spirit souls. We all belong to him. But we don't feel that way, We feel that actually we're the center. We're the greatest. Everyone should treat us well. Everyone should maybe even worship us subtly. We may even think that. We think we're in control. We want to take charge. We want to be given respect. And, everything should be for my enjoyment. And we forget Krishna. So that's the false ego. And this material world and the material elements that have been created, that's for our enjoyment, right? That's why we're here, to enjoy, because that's what we wanted. And if we were situated in our real identity as a soul, where we are part of Krishna, we love Krishna, we want to serve Krishna, we wouldn't be able to enjoy. And so that's why we have this false ego, to be able to enjoy in this world. And this ego starts at an individual level, I, me, mine. So, my phone, my house, my car, right? But then this also extends out, right? So you have then ego at a community level, my community. And then it extends out to society, and then out to country, national level. And then, we have countries who are fighting against each other, right? So many wars and stuff, right? So why is that? It's just a combat of these false egos. That's what they're colliding. These false egos are colliding, right? And so this false ego is basically everything is for me or an extension of me. Yeah? And it's like the ego is like a dress that is covering the soul. In Sanskrit, ego is ahankar, right? And it gives us conceptions of designations. Human being, animal, male, female, race, religion, economic background, my desires, my fears. So these are all unwanted designations, and it's got nothing to do with the soul, right? Like I said, it's like a dress. But if we want to develop our love for Krishna, we have to become free from these material designations. You've probably heard of this verse in the Gita, Sarva dharman pratyajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayashyami ma suchaha. So Krishna says, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So Krishna is saying, just shed all this away, all these unwanted things that we have because of the false ego. And this false ego is what is causing us a lot of suffering. It's because we identify ourselves with the body and the mind. It causes a lot of suffering. A lot of material desires are manifest just because of the fact that we identify ourselves with the body and other designations. People want money, fame, prestige, knowledge, etc., and it all arises from this false conception, this false identity. So how can we make steps towards then overcoming our false ego, right? So I came across these 7 tips I wanted to share with you all. So one is, when we do something and we're praised or it's successful, etc., let's not take on the credit, but we should pass on the credit to our teachers and to God, right? Because when we directly try to take the credit, our false ego will just become really, really proud, so it'll actually inflate the false ego. Secondly, we should reveal our mind about challenges that we're going through. Someone we trust should know about what's on our mind, our struggles, because generally we actually put on a mask in front of people in general, like everything's okay, I'm doing well, etc. But all of us go through challenges and struggles, But if we don't reveal them, then they'll just eat us up inside. And so externally things might look okay, but internally there's something else going on. So have people in your life, just a few people that you can trust and open up to. And it says half of the problems vanish just by sharing, But also it's nice to have a support system where we can discuss our challenges and, bad qualities that may be arising and we're identifying so that we can learn to deal with them. The third is doing some menial service. So, some people may come, to the temple to clean the temple or help out, in the kitchen, something which keeps us a little bit humble, because otherwise we always want to be at the top. But let's do some menial service to keep ourselves humble. The fourth is, we love it when people praise us, right? But when people criticize us, we don't like it and we want to stay away from them. But actually, we shouldn't make such a serious endeavor to keep away from those who may criticize us, because the people who criticize us actually remind us that there are still things that we need to work on, you know? So actually take it as a sign that, you know, actually, yeah, I'm not perfect and I've got things I still need to work on. Number 5 is reading scriptures. So a false ego is maintained and developed because of our ignorance. We're not understanding the greatness of Krishna like we heard in the purport. So we need to know more about Krishna. Number 6, so we know we can't immediately, just like that, give up our false ego. So instead we need to take steps, right? So let's set ourselves some goals to work towards it, you know? So for example, you may say, okay, I'm going to start reading the Gita from today, you know, maybe like a page a day, a verse a day, etc. But then hold yourself accountable to someone else, because you know that, oh, if this person knows that I'm failing to meet my goals, then it's going to make me look bad, and the ego doesn't like that, right? So keep yourself accountable to someone as you set those goals, and that will help you to actually meet those goals, but also then gradually purify you as well. And then the last tip is to pray to Krishna. You know, ultimately, we're limited, you know, by our bodies, our senses, you know, but if we pray to Krishna, then Krishna will help us. And so, with that understanding, you know, that we are actually servants of Krishna, as this verse says, you know, one who is factually convinced of Krishna's opulence and mystic power, he engages in unalloyed, pure devotional service. So if we can, through knowledge and overcoming our false ego, accept Krishna as God, be situated into our real identity, then we'll be able to surrender. When we come across something really, really great, you know, naturally, we feel humbled by it, you know? And it puts us in a position where, you know, we can actually accept something higher, a greater power. And then surrender to that becomes easy and natural, right? But if we don't accept something to be superior, then we can't necessarily submit to it, right? What does surrender actually mean, though? Nowadays, surrender has like a negative connotation where, you know, we interpret it as we need to take a lower position, inferior position to someone else or something else, or we're accepting defeat, you know? Why? Because we don't want to accept defeat. We always want to be superior. We want to be higher. We want to be right. We want to be the controller, the enjoyer. But actually, the word in Sanskrit for surrender is sharanagati, which actually means to take shelter. And actually, that's quite liberating, because then we know that we don't need to know everything or be at the top, because we're not in control, but we can take shelter of someone else who is. Surrender means surrendering our false ego, our false sense of identity, so that we can actually truly surrender our love, you know? It's like a child, you know? Naturally, a child goes towards their mother or their father, you know? And wants to be with them. So it's just natural, it's loving, you know? It's beautiful. So that's what surrender actually means when it comes to our relationship with Krishna. And, you know, we may think that, you know, we don't actually have a desire to connect with Krishna or take shelter of him. And that's because of this false ego and these qualities that are keeping us bound here. You know, lust, anger, greed, pride. But if you are serious, then you will take shelter of Krishna and try to overcome these qualities. But if you don't do that, what will happen is you end up taking shelter of these qualities itself. You will have to take shelter because we're not the controllers, right? So either we'll take shelter of this material world, this material energy, or we can choose to take shelter of Krishna. And in the Bhagavad Gita, actually, there are 3 verses on surrender which show the progressive stages. So I'll just read them. So in 2.7, Arjun says, he's confused, he doesn't know, and he asks Krishna, what should I do? What's my duty? So the first step in surrender is to admit, I don't know. And so going to someone or going to scriptures to get that help, you know, asking those questions. And there's humility in that, you know. I don't know, and I need help, so please help me. And that's the first step in surrender. Then in chapter 7, verse 14, Krishna says, after surrendering to someone or the scriptures, The next, you surrender to the process. So you take up a process, right? And Krishna says if you surrender to the process, then you can cross beyond this ocean of material existence. So that means, what is this process? That means a daily practice, something that will help you cultivate that bhakti. And then finally, the last stage of surrender that Krishna talks about is in 1866, which is the verse that we read. He says, abandon everything and surrender to me. And this is the deepest type of surrender, where we're willing to do whatever Krishna wants, and our will is aligned to Krishna's will. But surrender is a journey. Like I said, it's a progression. It doesn't mean we give up everything. And also, surrender isn't necessarily external giving up, but it's also an internal process. And it has to be genuine, If we're just giving up things externally, but internally we're still harboring these desires, and, we're not actually accepting Krishna as God, then that's not really surrender. And everyone will be on their own journey of surrender. So, we're somehow willing to trust this material energy, but we're not willing to trust Krishna. Like I said, you can either take shelter of the material energy or Krishna, because we're not really in control, even though sometimes we think we are. And often we just don't know how we can actually see, feel, perceive Krishna in our lives. But if we try to turn to him and perform devotional service, devotional activities, then we'll become immune to artificial, unnecessary, selfish desires that we are harboring and cultivating, because we will connect with Krishna, who is the source of everything. He's self-sufficient, right? If we connect to him, then we're not going to have any need for anything. And, towards the end of this purport, Prabhupada actually tells us something very, very important. He says, he actually tells us how we can be fixed in devotional service. How many times do we find ourselves like, yes, I feel inspired, I'm definitely going to do something spiritual, but then in a few hours, in a few days, in a few weeks, our motivation wanes, and slowly declines, and we end up then going back to our usual ways, and we don't follow through, And so what's really, really important is knowledge, hearing and reading, because by hearing more about Krishna, Prabhupada says our sincerity for devotional service becomes stronger and stronger. So we all have a tendency to hear, So let's switch that tendency and make endeavors to hear about Krishna, to know him, If we don't hear about him, then how are we going to know him? How are you going to know someone if you don't try to get to know them, right? And so Prabhupada's saying, let's try and understand the greatness of Krishna, and then we can fall in love with him, and we can surrender to him, take shelter of him. Thank you very much. Thank you for attending this evening's Bhagavad Gita class. We have a couple of minutes before Darshan opens for Aarti. If anyone has any comments or questions. No? Okay. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Sorry?
to sing? Okay. Kiba Jaya Jaya Gora Chandre Aratika Shobha. Okay, so just kind of keep me on beat because I don't know how to be on beat. Janavitavane Jagamanaloba Dakini Tai Chan Dame Gadara Dakini Tai Chan Dame Gadara Nikate Advaita Shrini Vasa Chatradara Nikate Advaita Shrini Vasa Chatradara Yache Gorachan Ratna Simhasane Dasi Yache Gorachan Ratna Simhasane bhaje paramarasala madhuramedanda bhaje paramarasala Sangha bhaje gandha bhaje madhu 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 bhaje Sangha bhaje gandha bhaje madhu 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 bhaje Sangha bhaje gandha bhaje madhu 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 bhaje madhu bhaje madhu 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 bhaje bhaje madhu 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 bhaje bhaje sangha bhaje gandha bhaje madhu 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 bhaje madhu bhaje sangha bhaje gandha bhaje madhu 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 bhaje madhu bhaje nitta gora hari bol hari bol hari bol nitta gora hari bol nitta gora hari bol hari bol hari bol nitta gora hari bol nitta gora hari bol hari bol hari bol nitta gora hari bol bahu koti chandrajini vadana ujjvala